Hello to all astrology enthusiasts. Today I want to discuss the transit of the planet Mars into a new zodiac sign. Mars has been in the signs of Cancer and Leo for a very long time, and it has been retrograde since the fall of last year, 2024. And finally, on the 17th of June 2025, Mars changed signs and moved into Virgo. Undoubtedly, Mars's energies have now shifted and will be expressed through the sign of Virgo. Mars began its transit in this sign at 11:36, and it will last until the 6th of August 2025. Before we look at the specific characteristics of Mars in Virgo, let's recall what Mars is responsible for in astrology, how it expresses its energies, what it influences in our lives, how it generally manifests, and what kinds of situations it can create. First of all, Mars is the planet of action, activity, and our deeds. It is the planet of our will, energy, desires, and sometimes even conflict. And in astrology, Mars symbolizes the masculine principle, dynamism, initiative, and the drive to achieve goals. In other words, it is that force within us that pushes us forward, makes us fight for our interests, defend ourselves, and strive for results. In astrology, Mars rules Aries and is also considered the ruler of Scorpio, but more so after Pluto. So Mars is a co-ruler for Scorpio. It is exalted in Capricorn. When Mars was in Cancer, it was in its fall. And now, accordingly, Mars has moved into Virgo. And in general, Mars is about energy and willpower. And on the physical level, it is responsible for our life force, our endurance, and our level of activity. It shows how we express our will, how we deal with obstacles, whether we are able to stand our ground or, on the contrary, tend to be passive and avoid conflict. In the natal chart, Mars indicates our manner of action, our physical activity and athletic inclinations, and in general, our response to threat or pressure. That is, for example, attack, defense, or flight. In addition, Mars can be involved in aggression, in conflicts. This is one of the shadow sides of Mars aggression. Specifically, Mars shows how we express our anger, how we defend our personal boundaries, how we engage in confrontation, and a harmonious Mars in our chart gives us the ability to control our drive, to use it constructively, to channel it in the right direction, and this can manifest in sports, in business, in leadership, and a disharmonious Mars, on the contrary, provokes conflicts. It makes us impulsive, gives us harshness, sometimes violence in any form. It symbolizes enmity, is responsible for weapons, the military, and competition. In social life, Mars is associated with law enforcement agencies, the military, athletes, surgeons, builders, and mechanics. And accordingly, since Mars is essentially a planet like an engine, it is Mars that shows what ignites us, where we feel a surge of energy, what motivates us to take action. And Mars tells us about the style in which we achieve what we want. On the psychological level, Mars is precisely responsible for our need for self-assertion. It is responsible for our I want. It stands in contrast to Venus with her message of I like. And this desire is not just about wanting something, but about acting to achieve it. It is also responsible for our sexuality. Especially for men, it represents an active, assertive sexual principle. In a woman's chart, Mars indicates the type of partner she is attracted to, and naturally we consider it together with Venus. If we talk about Mars and its transits, Any Mars transit always activates the energy of action in the area of life corresponding to the house of the horoscope it passes through. It can give us a surge of strength. It can give us motivation. It can bring our conflicts to the surface and create tension in our interactions. It can prompt us to take very quick, decisive actions. On the downside, Mars can lead to accidents, injuries, and arguments. Accordingly, when Mars forms any disharmonious aspects, it's about critical turning point moments, especially if the Sun, Moon, the angles of the chart, or the rulers of the houses are involved in this aspect. So how does Mars behave in the sign of Virgo? First of all, it's the energy of service, the energy of efficiency, precision, and logic. Here, Mars doesn't manifest as a bold drive like it does in the fire sign, especially in Leo, rather through analytical thinking, consistency, and heightened attention to detail. And here, Mars acts not for glory, but is focused on results and usefulness. In other words, it's like a surgeon wielding a sharp scalpel, very precise, very deliberate, extremely focused. Mars in Virgo allows us not to waste energy in vain, because the energy is used in measured amounts, in a very cyclical and organized way. And when Mars is in Virgo, we need to plan in advance where our energy will be directed. If we don't do this, we end up with internal overload or, on the downside, irritation. Mars in Virgo action happens when we have a clear task, a very understandable algorithm, and a clear measurable result. And here, Mars in Virgo certainly doesn't like spontaneity, chaos, panic, or shouting. On the contrary, it kicks in during stressful situations, but specifically to fix things and restore order. One of the key features of Mars in Virgo is the mental filtering of actions. In other words, there's no impulsiveness here. Everything is viewed with a critical eye. And before taking any step or action, we analyze how reasonable, safe, and appropriate it actually is. And of course, this provides extra reliability. It enhances our professionalism. But sometimes on the downside, it can slow down certain processes because of excessive self-control or simple perfectionism. And of course, on the negative side, Mars in Virgo can cause, for example, the "it's not time yet" syndrome, or constant internal criticism of one's actions, or we get stuck in minor details instead of moving forward. In addition, Mars in Virgo is an energy that manifests in precise, detailed work, because Mars in Virgo has a very good sense of form and process. It likes when everything works like clockwork. And of course, there can be irritation here if there is any carelessness, laziness, or lack of order. And people who have Mars in Virgo in their natal chart can be good programmers, researchers, doctors, or masters of this kind of fine, precise work. And accordingly, everywhere, of course, for accountants, this is a major indicator everywhere that requires precision and attentiveness. This is exactly where Mars in Virgo shows its strength. Also, Mars in Virgo is not prone to open scandals, but it can be very caustic, it can be ironic, and it can be very sharp with words. And Mars in Virgo doesn't defend itself with fists, but with sarcasm or facts or some kind of heightened logic. And here its aggression is more verbal, more mental, and most often passive. That is, it's nitpicking, it's making remarks, it's a kind of silent contempt, and it can help us hold back irritation for a very long time. But when it does break through, it naturally turns into destructive criticism. And here emotions are expressed not to show anger, but out of a desire to improve something. Mars in Virgo also works for results. Naturally, when we experience this transit, we can't tolerate shoddy work. We'd rather leave something unfinished than do it poorly. For Mars in Virgo, practical benefit is very important, a tangible, visible result. And by the way, people who have Mars in Virgo are often workaholics and may suffer from perfectionism. This is really the extreme, either a student syndrome or constant nervous tension that eventually manifests as psychosomatic issues. And here, when Mars in Virgo is active during this transit, it's very important to know how to delegate, for example, in business, and not try to take all the control upon yourself. If we look at the energies of Mars in Virgo on a physical level, we might experience internal tension, especially related to the back, neck, and intestines. In addition, it gives us increased sensitivity to nutrition or sparks a heightened interest in a healthy lifestyle, sports, and daily routines, because there is a newfound love for system and order even within our own bodies. So here, Mars in Virgo can, so to speak, fight against the chaos in our body and mind. And how might this manifest? There may be a fanaticism about proper nutrition or about practicing yoga or controlling weight and workouts. If we talk about the sexual side of life, Mars in Virgo is quite restrained here, but also very attentive, very delicate, and very caring. For Mars in Virgo, hygiene is important, as are aesthetics and mutual comfort. Moreover, Mars in Virgo can be critical of their partner, especially at the beginning of a relationship. This energy doesn't manifest as a bright passion, but rather as an intellectual, physical interaction, where the atmosphere is important, trust matters, and even, you could say, a certain usefulness. In other words, it's important for people to feel that they are needed by each other. And also when Mars in Virgo works at high vibrations, works in a positive way, it becomes a master of such strategic, conscious action that is, we are able to create new working systems during this transit. We are able to simplify the complex. We work at a high level with professionalism and we immerse ourselves deeply, so to speak, in work activities that should serve as an example for those around us. That is, Mars in Virgo can also manifest in those invisible, informal leaders who don't seek popularity, who aren't striving for the spotlight, but at the same time create a very solid foundation within the team, within the system, whether it's in the family or in a project. And accordingly, Mars in Virgo also expresses its energy on 3 levels: the mental, the emotional, and the physical. On the mental level, Mars works as the formula, logic plus analysis equals action. So here it manifests as analytical thinking. It gives us rationality and logic, a very critical way of thinking. And before taking action, we analyze every detail, we calculate possible risks, we make a plan or a scheme, and we look for the most efficient way to implement it. Impulsiveness is completely suppressed here. And we tend to think before, during, and after our actions. And we need to achieve such precision in everything. The main thing here is not to fall into excessive control and slowness, because that can stall processes. In other words, we might get stuck for a long time, say in the preparation stage, or we might criticize ourselves too much, thinking we have to do something better. Or, so to speak, we might show mental irritation toward the inefficiency of those around us. This might come out as, why didn't you think ahead to do it like this, this, and this? So on the positive side, it's clarity, strategic thinking, and structure. On the negative side, it's obsessing over mistakes, procrastination, because we're afraid of imperfect action. On an emotional level, Mars in Virgo gives us an energy where our emotions are very restrained and sometimes even suppressed. In other words, our emotions are basically analyzed by our mind first, and only then do we express them. Or, for example, we might turn anger into irony, sarcasm, some kind of criticism or passive aggression. Or we might experience an internal feeling like I have to be perfect. And this causes emotional overload within us. Or we feel a heightened sensitivity to disorganization, messiness, or irresponsibility, especially in other people. During this transit, our emotions can often manifest as irritation if something doesn't go according to plan, or as anxiety if we lack a clear structure or predictability in a situation, or as internal stress when we keep everything bottled up inside our bodies. In the positive, this is emotional self-discipline, restraint, and the ability to keep oneself under control. In other words, it's complete management of your emotional intelligence, so to speak. On the negative side, of course, it means suppressed feelings, some kind of hidden anger, and it can also lead to emotional burnout due to perfectionism. Accordingly, on the physical level, when Mars transits Virgo, we act in a very structured way. That is, we want to act according to a schedule, a daily routine with specific tasks that have been thought out in advance. We have increased sensitivity from the body, meaning in terms of nutrition, hygiene, and sleep rhythm. And accordingly, a strong love for cleanliness, order, and usefulness in any actions is also very evident. So, for example, during this transit, we want to exercise, but not for appearance's sake, but let's say for the benefit of our health. And the physical activity during the transit of Mars in Virgo can manifest as, for example, increased attention to posture, gait, techniques and detail, let's say, in Pilates, yoga or dance. Or we strive very much for neatness and efficiency, even in everyday life. And accordingly, we have a tendency toward muscle tension, spasms, and psychosomatic issues. So on the positive side, this means control over the body. On the positive side, it's precision of movement, a systematic approach, and care for our health. And on the negative side, this is tension, overexertion, and a kind of fanaticism when it comes to a healthy lifestyle or certain diets. So if we sum up these three levels, our mind provides the plan during this transit. Our emotions give us internal motivation, and our body works very precisely and efficiently without unnecessary effort. That's if we're talking about the positive manifestations. The transit of Mars in Virgo is exceptionally ideal for undertaking various repairs, for meticulously fine-tuning existing processes and intricate systems, for diligently handling important documents, for effectively tying up any remaining loose ends, so to speak, or for thoroughly conducting comprehensive audits, implementing necessary corrections, performing various detailed inspections, carefully checking established standards, or efficiently implementing significant technical improvements. In addition, it's a great time to start practicing yoga, get massages, begin treatment or preventive care, undergo diagnostics, start a new diet, or introduce healthy habits into your life. And accordingly, this is also a period of zero tolerance for mistakes, as I mentioned. So we will constantly focus on the negatives and what was done incorrectly or why something wasn't done according to the instructions. In other words, we will become deeply absorbed in details and secondary tasks. Of course, on the downside, this can slow down many processes. We may develop fears about our health, and for those for whom it is relevant, obsessive behavior or certain psychosomatic symptoms may appear. And accordingly, let's take a look at the main aspects Mars in Virgo will make during this transit until the 6th of August. On the 17th of June, Mars began its transit with 2 sextiles to the Sun and Jupiter in Gemini. What is this energy about? First of all, the energy of sextiles is quite subtle, but nevertheless, if we can sense it, we can use it in our lives. Mars in Virgo, in sextile to the Sun, in Gemini, is the energy of very active and, let's say, intelligent movement, when our thoughts and our actions are easily synchronized. In other words, this aspect provides the energy for making quick decisions or increased focus on details and a drive to use information very efficiently in order to achieve our goals. For example, in our lives, this energy can manifest as a desire to solve certain tasks or situations with increased productivity, or a wish to improve communication and exchange knowledge, or we may want to take the initiative under this aspect, especially in negotiations, educational processes, or during trips. That is, we can really feel a strong surge of energy that we need to organize some kind of work process or to quickly respond to new ideas. For example, under this aspect, it's a great time to start a useful project or to finish, say, an important correspondence or to conduct negotiations on very favorable terms because we are using a sharp mind and our actions are purposeful. The sextile with Jupiter here adds an energy of expansion and connects our pragmatism with Jupiterian optimism. With this aspect, we experience a strong sense of self-confidence. We have a desire to learn, to broaden our horizons, to take on new tasks and new responsibilities. At the same time, we can rely on well-thought-out plans. With this aspect, we are very actively involved in various projects and travels that are specifically connected to growth and development, including communication with other people. With this aspect, we can successfully start launching professional development courses, or we might get involved in implementing international projects, or we could receive very strong support from those around us. Additionally, here an extra layer of energy is provided by the conjunction of Mars with the star Regulus. In other words, this is a powerful energy of leadership, courage, and decisiveness, which is supported by our emotions and inner intuition. This aspect in general kindles an inner fire and calls on us to stand up for our values with a special, let's say, dignity and honor. So how might this manifest? We develop a desire to express ourselves, for example, as a protector of society or family, to show courage in certain personal or professional situations where emotional involvement is also important, where responsibility matters. You may feel the urge to lead others or to take initiative in important projects, for example, those related to home or family traditions. Here, the key is to control impulsiveness and avoid excessive aggression on the negative side so as to prevent conflicts from arising. For example, under this aspect, we might take a very decisive stand for justice within the family, start defending our personal boundaries, or get involved in socially significant projects that also bring emotional satisfaction. This combination adds an extra layer to the aspects of sextiles with the Sun and with Jupiter. On the 18th of June, a sextile with the asteroid Vesta in Scorpio also appears, and this brings an energy of very focused, deep dedication to a cause. In other words, this aspect helps us concentrate, and we are driven by an inner motivation. It activates in us a desire for perfection, and it allows us to take very purposeful actions. With this aspect, our focus works exceptionally well. We are concentrated on our tasks, we fully immerse ourselves in the process, and we are able and capable of maintaining secrecy and, let's say, handling financial matters or inheritance issues very carefully and methodically. We can delve into research, and we are able to study esoteric knowledge in great detail. And this aspect, in a way, gives us support so that we can accomplish our set task or goals effectively and with quality. On the 27th of June, we have a sextile between Mars and Lilith in Scorpio, with the black moon in Scorpio. And here, the energy of a very powerful liberation is activated, a kind of inner release from deep passions or the shadow sides of the personality, precisely through the fact that we can consciously control them. This aspect gives us the courage to explore our forbidden or hidden topics, to direct our energy toward working through personal fears, and to free ourselves from limitations. That is, with this aspect, we can very effectively, subtly, and persistently work through our inner conflicts, as well as issues of manipulation, hidden motives, and sexuality. This can apply both to ourselves personally and to the people around us. We may feel a surge of energy to expose some kind of falsehood, to leave toxic relationships, or to engage in deep psychotherapy or psychological work. The only thing is, it's important here to avoid destructive aggression and to channel your energy in a constructive direction. On this same day, we also have a trine with the retrograde asteroid Pholus in Capricorn. And this is the energy of a harmonious, so to speak, rebirth of our willpower and determination at the moment when we are rethinking our life goals. This aspect provides a very strong supportive energy, allowing us to return to some previously postponed plans or ideas, and gives us the opportunity to correct mistakes. On the 3rd of July, we have a conjunction of Mars in Virgo with the star Alioth. And this energy is about very quick, decisive, and precise action. Here we have an intensified sense of responsibility, heightened pragmatism under this aspect, and it helps us mobilize our inner resources to effectively accomplish certain tasks, especially those related to order, discipline, and attention to detail. In life, this can manifest as a desire to organize work processes, improve your health, or complete complex projects with a high degree of accuracy and responsibility. That is, under this aspect, we may feel a surge of energy to get work done methodically and precisely, while also being fast and maintaining high quality at the same time. For example, we might engage in sports using a specific technique, or we might quickly sort through accumulated tasks and promptly correct mistakes in work processes. In other words, our ability to quickly respond to any changes and adapt increases here, while still maintaining the focus and discipline that Mars in Virgo demands from us. On the 7th of July, the day when the planet Uranus changes zodiac signs, a sextile opens between Mars in Virgo and the retrograde asteroid Juno in Scorpio. This brings energy for deep work and strengthening of our partnerships through very conscious, purposeful actions. This aspect itself promotes our internal rethinking of roles within a couple, commitments, and personal boundaries in relationships, and gives us the opportunity to defend our values and boundaries with great resilience and calm. For example, this aspect may manifest as a desire to work on personal relationships, on trust, mutual understanding, or a wish to resolve conflicts, misunderstandings, and to overcome certain crises in personal relationships. We may also conduct a kind of review of our agreements and contracts, especially where there is an element of responsibility and trust. At the same time, we have both willpower and tact with this aspect, and we can handle all of this in a very constructive way. One of the most significant aspects during Mars's transit through Virgo is the conjunction of Mars with the South Karmic node, which is also currently in Virgo. And this is an energy that will allow us to complete old karmic cycles through our very active and purposeful actions. In other words, this aspect will stimulate us to let go of certain habitual patterns of behavior. Or it may manifest as a significant opportunity to effectively close certain challenging situations, decisively end toxic and detrimental relationships, or completely get rid of limiting beliefs that have genuinely held us back in the past and significantly hindered our personal growth and overall development. So, under this aspect, we may be faced with the need to finish up some long-standing matters, processes, or relationships. And at the same time, we won't feel any unnecessary perfectionism or excessive self-criticism. In other words, we do this very easily in order to free up our space for something new. The only thing is, it's very important here to use Mars energy constructively, not negatively, so as not to create additional problems. Accordingly, at the same time, there is an opposition to the North Node in Pisces, the node of the future. And here there's a bit of a inner conflict because we still have the desire to control something. And here, the North Node is actually calling us to move forward with trust and to accept certain things, to let them go so that they, let's say, can resolve themselves more independently. So in other words, this aspect, despite its contradictory energy, sets the task for us to let go of rigid control or perfectionism and to move forward into the future very smoothly, very intuitively. There may be situations here where we need to choose between our pragmatism, our logic, and this need to go with the flow, to trust the circumstances. That is, when we simply need to relax. And naturally, considering that this is a disharmonious aspect, there may be a conflict here, an internal conflict between our needs, yes. And this necessity to let go of everything. Either we just need to freely delegate certain tasks, or we need to freely accept help from other people and not get hung up on these moments. So here we need to find balance. The exact aspect occurs on the 21st of July 2025. Accordingly, this is a long-lasting aspect, a long-lasting energy. On the 15th of July, we will have a square between Mars and Venus in Gemini. This is a kind of conflicting energy between the masculine and the feminine. And the aspect itself will bring the energy of tense interactions, specifically between our drive for practicality, attention to detail, and the lightness and freedom in communication, the search for new experiences. Because Venus in Gemini is as free as possible, as light as possible. And this aspect will create internal or external contradictions precisely between the desire to bring order and the need for variety, lightness, freedom, and the expression of emotions. In relationships, this aspect may manifest as irritability, misunderstandings, and arguments based on differing viewpoints between partners. For example, one partner may want to clearly organize their shared life together with plans, while the other partner wants freedom and doesn't like restrictions. And of course, this will lead to certain conflicts and misunderstandings. There may be situations where, for instance, intolerance of minor flaws, nitpicking, or excessive criticism will surface. This is exactly what Mars in Virgo represents, and it will offend or irritate Venus in Gemini, who desires lightness and ease, especially in personal relationships. And there may be an internal struggle between the desire to act very carefully and rationally, and at the same time the need for variety and flexibility. What is important here? It is important to listen to your partner, to show tolerance for the fact that we are very different, and to find balance. The exact aspect occurs on the 23rd of July. On the 1st of August, a trine between Mars in Virgo and Uranus in Gemini begins. And this is the first aspect between Uranus and Mars since Uranus changed zodiac signs after 7 years. Here, the energy of fresh ideas will come into our lives, along with the drive for independence and the desire to act in unconventional ways. This aspect will provide very powerful inspiration and originality, enhancing our ability to quickly adapt to changes. Moreover, it will combine the practicality of Mars in Virgo with freedom, mental flexibility, and adaptability, since Uranus is in Gemini after all. And in our lives, there may be a desire to introduce some innovations into everyday affairs, to use new technologies, or to solve work tasks in unconventional ways. We react very quickly to any new opportunities or unexpected changes. So this is a time when you can confidently start experimenting with new work methods, technologies, and unusual approach, especially when it comes to communication. This aspect gives a very strong internal boost, energy. It supports our ability to act decisively and creatively at the same time. It gives us the opportunity to expand our boundaries, step out of the familiar, and get rid of some comfort zone. On the 2nd of August, we will also have two oppositions, here to retrograde Saturn and to retrograde Neptune in the sign of Aries. With Saturn, this will be the energy of an internal confrontation between the desire to act actively after all. It's Marsan, the necessity, for example, to endure something or to exercise self-discipline or to rethink some past mistakes. Of course, this will create tension between our desire to move very quickly and the limitations that Saturn imposes on us. It can cause a sense of frustration, slow down work processes, and this aspect forces us to reconsider our plans and methods, especially in career, health, and certain personal projects. That is, we may encounter situations where our activity meets resistance. This could be tough negotiations, delays in carrying out work tasks, mistakes, and the need to correct them. Moreover, Saturn is retrograde in Aries for the first time. It gives us a chance to understand the reasons behind these obstacles more deeply. It gives us the opportunity to build a more mature and stable strategy for our actions. And of course, in order to make the most of this aspect, you need to show a certain amount of patience, carefully plan your steps, and avoid impulsive actions. If we also consider the aspect with Neptune, then it adds, let's say, the energy of inner conflict connected to our illusions and our inner doubts. Because after all, Neptune blurs our reality. It makes us uncertain about our own abilities, especially since this is a disharmonious aspect. We might misjudge the situation, we might fall into some kind of self-deception, or we might encounter some confusion in our affairs, and accordingly, this too will cause certain difficulties. Nevertheless, on August 3rd, a trine forms between Mars in Virgo and retrograde Pluto in Aquarius. The aspect is very harmonious and gives us opportunities for inner transformations, which will be supported by determination and our drive thanks to Mars. And the aspect itself will give us the opportunity and ability to transform difficult situations in our lives while taking very well thought out actions. Pragmatism. Keep in mind that Pluto's energy is very powerful and Mars in Virgo is very pragmatic, and all of this will be directed toward renewal or freeing ourselves from some old structures in our lives. This is a period when the aspect gives us the opportunity to successfully sort out some complicated long-standing problems that are, for example, related to teamwork, group activities, social projects, or technologies. And these changes can be made precisely at the level of entire systems. This is a very good aspect for conducting a review, optimizing work processes, and introducing some innovative approaches into your work. Keep in mind that the retrograde Pluto also gives us the opportunity to work with shadow aspects, and it helps us reach a new level of strength and control over any situation. And by also using the energy of Mars in Virgo, this can be done very persistently, very purposefully, and it will provide the opportunity to move forward. During these aspects, Mars completes its transit in the sign of Virgo and moves into Libra on the 6th of August 2025. And in the next video, we will look at Mars's transit in Virgo for all 12 zodiac signs. I wish you success. Use the energies of this transit to your advantage. Subscribe, like, and share this video. See you soon.